I always thought I knew my wife pretty well. We'd been together for over a decade. Little things about her, how she liked her coffee, her laugh, the way she touched her hair when she was nervous, those details felt like they were mine to know. To everyone else, we looked like the perfect couple. We had a house in the suburbs, 2 kids, a dog that thought he was the king of the world. Life was comfortable, predictable, safe. But inside, I always had this little nagging doubt that something was missing, a feeling that maybe I was missing something. It was a Thursday afternoon when I first started noticing the signs. Nothing obvious, no huge fights or accusations. Just small things, her phone buzzing constantly, her sudden nervousness whenever I came near her. I shook it off at first, telling myself she was just stressed at work or something. But then I noticed her messages, hidden behind a code, deleted after she read them. I remember one night I caught her quickly locking her phone as I walked into the room. I saw the flicker of the screen, that quick swipe of her thumb to hide whatever she was hiding. I was tired that day, so I didn't push. Instead, I kept an eye on her. The next few days, her behavior became more tense. She'd disappear into the bathroom for long stretches. Her voice would get strained when she answered calls. I'd ask her if everything was okay, and she'd brush me off with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just work stuff," she'd say, or "it's nothing, really." But I wasn't buying it anymore. Then came the night I caught her. I was in the living room, flipping through some old photos of us when I noticed her phone buzz again. It was sitting on the coffee table, and I could see the screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize. My stomach twisted. My instincts kicked in. I reached for it without thinking, unlocking her phone with the code I'd memorized long ago. The message was blunt: "Can't wait to see you tonight," followed by a heart emoji. That was the moment I felt the world tilt beneath me. My hands went cold. My mind raced. I wanted to scream, to yell, but I just sat there staring at the screen. I felt every bit of my blood drain away, replaced by a cold, rising fury. I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. My first instinct was to confront her right then and there, but I knew better. This wasn't some random slip-up. It was something much bigger. They had been sneaking around for who knows how long. That night I stayed awake, waiting for her to come home from wherever she was. When she finally slipped into bed, her face was calm, as if she hadn't just betrayed everything we built. I kept my eyes on her, my heart pounding so loud I thought she might hear it. "You've been lying to me," I finally said, my voice surprisingly steady. She froze, then turned to me, forcing a weak smile. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out her phone and placed it on the bed between us. "I know about the affair, the messages, the meeting at our house tonight. How long has this been going on?" Her face went pale and her hand trembled as she reached for her phone. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I snapped, feeling the heat rise in my chest. "You've been cheating on me with my best friend, and you thought I wouldn't find out, that I'd just ignore it." Her eyes darted away and she tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "It's not what it looks like." "Oh, really? Because it looks a lot like betrayal," I said, trying to keep my voice from breaking. My palms were sweaty, my stomach twisted like I'd swallowed a live wire. I could feel the rage boiling under my skin, but I managed to keep it in check, just barely. She broke down then, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't mean for it to happen, it just did. I was lonely and I—" "Save it," I interrupted. "You're done. I don't want to hear any more excuses. Just pack your things, tomorrow or today, whichever. I want out." That night I lay in bed listening to her sob quietly, my mind racing. The house, once full of love and laughter, now felt like a prison. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train, shocked, broken, betrayed. That's when I knew I had to fight back. Not with tears or shouting, but with something smarter. I needed a plan, something she wouldn't see coming, something that would make her regret crossing me. I stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of everything crashing down in a way I'd never experienced before. I'd loved her, trusted her, shared my life with her. And now I was planning my revenge, because if she thought she could get away with this, she was dead wrong. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stayed awake, my mind spinning in 1,000 directions. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, that look of guilt mixed with fear when I revealed I knew the truth. I knew I had to do something, and I had to do it carefully. No rash moves, no shouting. Revenge needed to be calculated, precise. I wasn't going to let her walk away without feeling the weight of what she'd done. The next morning, I started by gathering evidence. I knew I couldn't just confront her blindly. That made me look desperate or foolish, so I paid close attention. I installed a few hidden cameras in the living room and the hallway. Nothing obvious, just small devices I could monitor discreetly. I needed to catch her in the act if she was still sneaking around. While she was out that day, I also took her phone and went through her recent messages. I wanted to see how long this affair had been going on, how deep it ran. The truth was, I already suspected it was longer than I wanted to admit. The messages painted a picture: flirty, intimate exchanges, calls late at night, plans for meetings. They all confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't just a fling. It was something she had invested in secretly behind my back. I felt my stomach turn at the thought. How could I have missed the signs? How could I have been so blind? The worst part was knowing they'd been meeting at our house in my space under my nose. That alone was enough to make my blood boil. By mid-afternoon, I had enough. I sat her down in the living room with all the evidence spread out on the table, the messages, the pictures, the timestamps. Her face was ghostly pale, her eyes darted around like a trapped animal. She knew she'd been caught, and she knew there was no escape. "I want to know everything," I said, my voice cold and steady. "How long has this been going on? When did you start sneaking around with him?" She broke down then, tears streaming, voice trembling. "It's been a few months. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was lonely, I guess. It just happened, I swear. I never wanted to hurt you." I looked her in the eye, feeling a strange mixture of fury and disappointment. "You didn't want to hurt me. You're standing here crying, lying about something that's destroyed everything I thought we had. You've been meeting him at our house behind my back, and you think a few tears will fix this." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Please, I didn't want it to be like this. I still love you, I was lost." That was the moment I realized I couldn't just let her go, not without making her understand the consequences. I had to strike back, but smart, cold, calculated. I started sketching out a plan, the kind of revenge that would hit her where it hurt without crossing the line into anything destructive or illegal. I didn't want her to think I was just angry. I wanted her to feel the pain of betrayal, to see what it was like to be humiliated. I told her I was going to leave for a few days, that I needed time to think. That was partly true. I needed space, but also I needed to set things in motion. I spent hours researching how to make her regret this. I wanted her to see that her actions had consequences. That betrayal wasn't just a secret affair. It was the beginning of her downfall. Over the next few days, I set my plan into motion. First, I hired a private investigator. I needed to know if she was still meeting him or anyone else. Second, I made a few calls to my lawyer, preparing for what was to come. Lastly, I started planting little clues, subtle enough that she wouldn't catch on right away. Nothing big, just enough to make her start questioning herself, to make her paranoid. My goal was to get her to feel the weight of her own lies. I knew I had to be patient. Revenge was a game of patience, of waiting for the perfect moment. Meanwhile, I kept my face calm, my tone even when I spoke to her. "If you're truly sorry, then I want you to think about what you've done. I want you to understand the pain you've caused, because I promise you I won't let this slide, not without consequences." That's when the real planning began. I had her right where I wanted her, cornered, fragile, and starting to unravel. But I also knew better than to show all my cards. The next move would be hers, and I was ready to strike. I just hoped I had the patience to see it through. The days that followed felt like walking on razor blades. Every moment I wasn't actively planning, I was battling this gnawing ache deep in my gut. Anger, betrayal, hurt, all mixed into a relentless storm. I kept my cool on the surface, but inside I was calculating every step, every possible outcome. My mind kept circling back to that house, that betrayal right under my nose, like some sick joke I'd been too blind to see. Meanwhile, I watched her, trying to read her reactions, pick up on any sign that she was feeling the pressure. She was still acting strangely, more nervous than usual. She'd hover near her phone, check the door constantly, and her eyes darted whenever I entered the room. It was clear she felt it, that she knew I was onto her, and that made me all the more determined. I wanted to make her pay, but I also wanted her to see the devastation she'd caused. That's when I decided to intensify my plan. I hired the pie, and within a couple of days I had the confirmation I needed. She'd been meeting him again even after I made it clear I was watching. The pie's reports were straightforward. He'd seen her at the same restaurant, then at a hotel, always with a different guy, but the pattern was clear. She was still trying to see him behind my back, even after all that had come out. I sat her down again that evening, all the evidence in hand. Her face was a ghostly white, her hands trembling. She knew what was coming. I looked at her, feeling the fire of betrayal burning hotter than ever. "So this wasn't just a one-time thing," I said, voice steady but cold. "You're still seeing him, even after I told you I knew. How many more lies are there?" She looked down, tears in her eyes. "It's not like I wanted to hurt you, I was so lonely, and he made me feel alive again for a bit. I swear I never meant for it to get this far." I clenched my fists. "You're lying," I snapped. "You're still meeting him, aren't you, right now as we speak?" Her voice cracked. "Please, I love you. I don't want to lose everything." I cut her off. "Save it. I've had enough of your lies. I want you gone, today." She started crying in earnest, sobbing uncontrollably. "I really am sorry. I'll leave, I swear. Just don't do anything stupid." That was the moment I pulled out my phone and showed her the recent messages from him, photos from their latest meetup, timestamps confirming she'd been lying all along. Her face crumpled. She looked lost, defeated, and scared. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and disgust. Satisfaction because she finally saw I wasn't fooling around anymore. Disgust because I realized how far gone everything had become. I told her I was done. I would leave. And she could figure out what she wanted to do next. I went to pack a bag, feeling my jaw tighten with each step. I knew I had to act fast to end this chapter before things spiraled even further out of control. I couldn't stomach the idea of her sneaking around in the house again, or worse, her expecting me to forgive and forget. But I also knew this wasn't just about leaving her. That was only the beginning. I'd been betrayed in a way I never thought possible, and I was going to make sure she paid. I wasn't about to let her get away with this. The lies, the sneaking, the betrayal. I needed her to understand that she had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. So I sat in my car, watching her pack her things silently. Her hands shook as she folded clothes, and her eyes were red-rimmed, hollow. The house, once full of warmth and life, felt cold and empty now. I felt that old familiar rage bubbling up again. This time, not just from the betrayal, but from how easy it had been for her to shatter everything. When she was finally ready, I handed her the keys. "You're leaving, don't come back, and don't contact me or the kids until I say so." I watched her walk out, a ghost of a woman, and felt this strange, bitter relief. Maybe it was justice, maybe just revenge. Either way, I knew I'd taken back some control. As she drove away, I felt the weight lift just a little. It wasn't pure victory, not yet, but it was the first step. I'd finally taken my stand. And I promised myself that I'd never let someone betray me like that again. That night I sat alone in the house, the silence almost deafening. I looked around at the empty rooms, feeling both relief and a strange emptiness. I knew I'd come out of this stronger, but I also knew the scars of betrayal would stay with me. Still, I'd done what I had to do. I'd taken back my dignity, my respect, and my life. Sometimes, revenge isn't about hurting the other person just to satisfy your rage. It's about reclaiming what's yours, about showing them that their actions have consequences. I didn't need to destroy her completely. I just needed her to know that I was in control. That's the real power. The days after she left felt like breathing underwater. The house was eerily quiet. No footsteps, no whispers, no smell of her perfume lingering in the air. It was strange how quickly life can shift, how suddenly everything you thought was solid crumbles beneath your feet. I'd kept busy, of course, making sure all my bases were covered. I contacted a lawyer, more for peace of mind than anything else, and finalized the paperwork for the separation. I was determined to cut all ties cleanly, no dragging it out, no messy confrontations. But underneath all that, I was still angry. I didn't just want her to leave, I wanted her to feel what I felt. Every time I saw the empty space at the dinner table, I felt that cold, hollow ache in my chest again. I'd kept the evidence I found, those messages, the photos, close for a while. I reread them often, trying to remind myself I wasn't paranoid that she'd betrayed me. One thing I learned during this whole mess is that betrayal doesn't just happen overnight. It's slow, insidious, sneaking in little by little until one day it explodes. I saw the signs clearly now, those nervous glances, the secretive phone checks, the disappearances. I'd ignored them because I loved her, but love doesn't make you blind to the cracks in the foundation. And now, with her gone, I finally started to piece everything together. How deep her deception ran and how I'd been played for a fool. I knew I had to do something, something I hadn't yet done, an act of finality that would make her regret ever crossing me. I wasn't interested in petty revenge anymore. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her betrayal. That's when I decided to contact her lover directly. It wasn't something I'd planned initially, but I realized I had to see him face to face. I needed to make him realize the damage he'd done, the pain he'd caused. I wanted to give him a taste of what it felt like to be on the receiving end. I found his number through one of the messages I'd saved. I was nervous, but also cold and determined. I dialed, and after a few rings, he answered. His voice was casual, almost dismissive. "Yeah, you're the guy she's been meeting at my house," I said, my voice low but firm. "You're the reason she's gone now. I want you to know exactly what you've cost me." There was a pause on the other end, then he snorted. "Look, man, I don't know what your deal is, but don't give me that bullshit," I cut him off. "You think this is just some game, you're screwing with my life, and I want you to understand the pain you're causing. If you think I'm just going to roll over, you're dead wrong." He hesitated, then finally spoke. "Listen, I didn't think it'd get this serious. Honestly, I thought she was done with you." "You thought wrong," I said, my voice ice cold now. "You're not just messing around with her, you're messing with my life. Don't contact her again, or next time I'll find you and make sure you regret it." I hung up before he could respond. The adrenaline surged through me, and I felt the sharp satisfaction of taking control. I didn't want to destroy him, at least not physically, but I wanted him to know that his actions had consequences, that I was no longer the naive fool he'd taken for one. That evening I sat outside in the fading light, reflecting on everything. The betrayal, the pain, the revenge, all of it. I knew I stirred the hornet's nest, and I'd have to be ready for whatever came next. But at the same time, I felt a strange sense of relief. I had taken the first concrete step toward reclaiming my life. The house was empty, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I also started planning my next move, things I'd do to protect myself and my kids from any further fallout. I was careful about what I said and did, knowing full well that betrayal leaves scars and some of them run deep. But I was done playing the victim. I was in control now, whether she liked it or not. That night, I poured myself a drink, sat on the porch, and stared at the stars. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her or anyone else take me down again. I'd stand tall, rebuild, and move on better, stronger, and more aware of what real betrayal looks like. The silence in the house after she left was deafening. I'd always thought I knew what loneliness felt like, but this was different. It was a heavy, suffocating void that seemed to swallow everything I knew about my life. Yet beneath that, I also felt a strange sense of clarity, like I'd finally peeled back the layers of illusion I'd been living under. I'd thought I was happy, secure, loved, but it was all a lie. I spent those days not just healing, but also reflecting intensely. I replayed every moment, the signs I'd missed, the subtle hints that should have screamed at me. I looked at my house, at the empty spaces she once filled with her presence, and realized I had to do more than just cut her loose. I had to close that chapter forever. I couldn't let her come back, not after everything. Not after she'd turned my home into her secret rendezvous spot. That's when I started to think about what truly mattered and what I wanted to do about it. I wasn't just angry, I was furious. But I also knew revenge wasn't just about hurting her. It was about making her feel the consequences of her choices. I wanted her to see the pain she'd caused, to understand that I was not some naive pushover she could manipulate anymore. I went through every possible route, legal, emotional, even subtle acts of control. I contacted a lawyer again, prepared to file for full custody of the kids. I wanted to make sure she understood that her actions had dire consequences, that her betrayal was not just a fleeting mistake but a fundamental breach of trust. I also made arrangements to get the house appraised, thinking ahead about what my next steps would be if I decided to sell or keep it. But I knew I had to do something more visceral, something that would send a clear message. That's when I remembered an old friend who was quite skilled in the art of subtle sabotage. Not the destructive kind, but the kind that made someone realize they messed with the wrong person. I reached out to him, explained the situation briefly, and asked for his advice. His words stuck with me. You don't need to destroy her. You just need to make her feel that she's lost something she can't get back. That's real pain. If she's going to be a snake, make her regret ever crossing you. I realized he was right. I didn't need to turn into the monster she thought I was. I just had to show her that I was no longer the naive husband she'd taken for granted. I started planting small, almost invisible traps, not literal ones, more like psychological traps. I slowed down my communication with her, deliberately ignoring her calls and messages, making her wait. I also made a few subtle moves to show her that I was in control. I let her see me moving on, dating again, even going out with friends. Nothing overt, just enough to make her realize I wasn't sitting around waiting for her to come back. Meanwhile, I kept the evidence I'd gathered close. I knew she'd try to spin it, deny everything, or act innocent. But I was ready for that. I had kept all the proof, screenshots, messages, photos, and I was prepared to let her see it all if she ever tried to downplay her betrayal. I wanted her to remember. The truth was in the facts, and I wasn't going to let her forget. The most satisfying part of this process was watching her become more paranoid and anxious. I'd see her checking her phone more, often trying to hide her nervousness when I went out. I'd catch her staring at the door, wondering if I was coming back early. That feeling of control, of making her sweat just a little, was addictive. It was my way of turning the tables, of showing her she couldn't manipulate me anymore. One night, I decided to give her a little scare. I left a note on her pillow, nothing threatening, just a simple message. You've lost what was mine. Don't come back. I left it unsigned, knowing it would unsettle her even more. The look on her face when she found it told me I'd hit the mark. She must have been questioning everything, terrified of what I might do next. At this point, I was feeling more resolute than ever. I wasn't going to let her come back and pretend everything was fine. No, this was about making her see the damage she'd done, about making her understand that she'd crossed a line from which there was no return. I wasn't asking for forgiveness anymore, I was demanding respect. I knew I'd be okay, regardless of what happened next. She made her choice, and now she had to live with the consequences. The house was quiet, but inside me, something had shifted. I felt stronger, more determined. The betrayal had cut deep, but I was healing with each small step I took. I'd show her, and everyone else, that a man betrayed and hurt but still standing tall was a force to be reckoned with. The day I finally decided to close this chapter forever felt like stepping into a new world. I had spent weeks meticulously planning, gathering every piece of evidence and setting up the final moves. I didn't want any more games, no more waiting. It was time for the truth to come out in the clearest, most definitive way possible. I called her one last time, no hesitation, no second guessing. I told her to meet me at the house, that I had something important to give her. She was hesitant, nervous, but I could hear the faint tremor in her voice. When she arrived, I was already standing in the living room, the evidence laid out on the table like a battlefield. Photos, texts, the private investigator's report, all of it. Her eyes widened as she took it all in. Her face blanched, then twisted into a mixture of guilt and fear. "What is this?" she whispered, voice trembling. "This," I said, voice calm but unwavering, "is everything, every lie, every betrayal. You wanted to pretend none of this mattered, but it does, and I'm done pretending too." I pushed the files towards her. "You crossed a line, you broke my trust, and I've decided I won't be a part of this anymore. I'm taking the kids and starting fresh." She looked like she was about to break down again, but she was also trembling with a different kind of fear, one I knew well. That fear of losing everything, of realizing that her deception had cost her more than she thought. I watched her hand shake as she reached for the papers, her eyes darting from me to the evidence. "You're serious," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Dead serious," I replied. "I'm done. I'm filing for divorce today. And I want full custody of the kids, because I don't want them growing up in a house with a mother who lied and cheated for months. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "Please," she begged, voice cracking, "don't do this. I love you. I swear I'll change. Just give me another chance." That's when I finally stood up, feeling a strange mixture of relief and finality. "Love isn't supposed to hurt this much," I said quietly. "You chose your path and I can't follow you down it. This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about reclaiming my life, my dignity. And I'm not going to let you take that from me." I reached into my pocket, pulled out the keys, and handed them to her. "Here, the house is yours, but I want you out by the end of the week. After that, I'll file the papers and we'll go from there." She took the keys, hands trembling, eyes glassy. She said nothing, just nodded. The silence stretched between us, heavy with what had been lost and what was finally being set free. As I turned to leave, I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was like shedding a heavy coat I'd been wearing for years, one soaked in betrayal and heartbreak. I looked back at her, at the house that had once been full of love, now just a symbol of deceit. I realized how much I'd changed, how much I'd grown. I'd been betrayed, yes, but I'd also reclaimed my strength. I knew I'd be okay. I knew I could start over. Walking out that door with the keys in her hand and my future ahead of me, I finally let go. I felt the weight of the past lift, replaced by a quiet certainty that I was finally in control again. The pain would fade. The scars would remain, but they wouldn't define me. And as I drove away from that house, away from everything that once held me hostage, I knew one thing for certain. I'd survived, I'd fought, and I'd come out stronger. That's the real victory.